Fourth chapter, packed with goodies. I can't wait to share it with you. So like I said, a lot of stuff is happening right now in chapter 4. This is essentially the 1970s onwards, or really 1976, when CDO, or Cordao de Ouro, becomes a thing. And the chapter kind of goes off from there. I want to talk a little bit about Mestre Brasilia and his involvement with CDO, because he is one of the founding members of CDO. Mestre Brasilia actually started capoeira because he got beat up by some kid. He used to fight a lot when he was little. And apparently he found out that one of the kids, he asked him, like, what do you do? Like, how did you beat me? And he says, oh, I do capoeira. So he was like, okay, so now I'm going to train capoeira, so the next time I'll beat your ass. Mestre Brasilia is more of the Angola side of CDO, I guess you can say. And Mestre Suassuna is more of the regional side. This is where their two origins sort of came together. Eventually, Mestre Brasilia started his own group, but that was a few years later on. So in the beginning, they were both together teaching and everything. But yes, later on, it was just Mestre Suassuna leading Cordao de Ouro. So during these early years, Mestre Suassuna really had a reputation. He was known for being fast, aggressive, playing amazing, and people loved watching him. People would admire him and say like, oh my God, like I need to train with this person, he's so good. And one of Mestre's students, Freguesia, he's the one who tells the story of how he got started. And it was just that. He saw Mestre Suassuna playing, he's like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. I have to go train with him now. So he found out where his school was and he went right away. And he stuck with him. And I think that's a cool story because I think a lot of people relate to it. I think people see CDO and they think like, holy crap, like the style's amazing, the way people play, it's like, it's not optimal, it's not direct, it's not benção, chapa, martelo, but it's beautiful and it can still be hard. It can still be incredibly difficult to perform. It's still challenging both mentally and physically. So I think a lot of people see that and they kind of have that same feeling that people might have gotten when they saw Mestre Suassuna play, which I think is a really cool thing to relate those two things. Obviously, chapter 4 describes a lot of different stuff going on. It goes basically from the 70s all the way to the early 2000s, and it's hard to really go through everything, but some of the more exciting stuff is really in the 70s, and I'll kind of blast through some of the events and kind of tell a few stories. In 1970, Almir, one of Mestre Suassuna's students, hosted a leftist party meeting at Mestre Suassuna's academy. So that turned out to be not such a good idea because Mestre Suassuna eventually, when he came back, because he was on vacation, he came back. When he came back, he was arrested by the federal government of Brazil and tortured for weeks by them. And they were asking him, it's like, oh, well, you're hosting these leftist meetings here. And he's like, no, it's not me. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, what are you guys even talking about? And he's tortured for weeks until finally they let him go. I guess it's resolved. It's not really clear what happens, and I wonder if even Mestre Suassuna knows what happened really, why they let him go. But they did eventually, and it's kind of a crazy story that happens. Like, the man was tortured and electrocuted by the federal government. Like, I know it's a thing that happened during the dictatorship, and I know it happens in a lot of countries, but to hear that Mestre Suassuna went through all that, it's pretty rough. Mestre Cajiquinha recognizes Mestre Suassuna as a mestre, which I don't know if that means he wasn't already a mestre. I thought he was. It's not really clear. I was kind of reading the whole book, and honestly, it's not really clear who's a mestre and when they become mestre. I don't know how relevant it is, to be honest. But for whatever reason, Mestre Cajiquinha says, hey, I love your work, dude. And he accepts him as a mestre. I don't know if that's how he got his title or if that's just one mestre recognizing another person as mestre. It could be either one. Again, it's not clear, but it's something cool to note, and I thought I should bring it up. So that's 1974. So in 1975, Mestre Suassuna records his first LP, and that actually helps bring a lot of recognition to the group CDO, a lot of recognition to Mestre Suassuna in general. He has an amazing voice, and it's amazing that he never really recorded anything before But he does in 1975, and all these people start hearing his music. And even today, people will always say to me, like, oh yeah, Mestre Suassuna has an amazing voice. His CD's amazing. Like, and I even, like, not really liking capoeira music in the beginning, loved hearing Mestre Suassuna's voice on his CDs. They are excellent, and they continue to be excellent even as he's getting older. His voice is still amazing, and he could definitely come out with another CD. Who knows? As we kind of left off in the third chapter, capoeira is not really a thing in the 60s and in the 50s in Sao Paulo, but by the 70s, Sao Paulo becomes a breeding ground for capoeira, and Mestre Suassuna is really one of those people at the head of the curve on this. And his group is growing and becoming stronger and bringing in great people, and you really see that in the book. And that's not without some upsets or with some incidents. And one of the stories that's told is about how one of Mestre Suassuna's students actually holds him at gunpoint over some sort of argument. And it's crazy. Like, you would think, you know, if you were there, you're like, oh my God, this guy's about to kill my teacher. Like, what do I do? But it doesn't happen. I'm not gonna say everything that happens. You really should read the book on this. I think it's a beautiful little story arc about one of Mestre Suassuna's students, but it's something that if you read, it'll have a lot more impact. But just know that it's a crazy story. It's got a lot of ups and downs, and it ends well. It ends well for both the student and for Mestre Suassuna. So it has a happy ending, as told by Mestre Caveirinha, Mestre Marcelo Caveirinha, Eddie Gordo. I'm not going to go too much into it just because there's so much detail I can go into on this last chapter. The last chapter is about half the book, so there's so much stuff to go over. But yeah, if you guys want, I can do additional videos later on some of that stuff. So there's 3 other big milestones that I wanted to bring up. One of which is the creation of Miyujinho as the game itself. Again, Mestre Suassuna says that it's not a new style of playing. He actually says that he got a lot of the influence for Miyujinho from Mestre João Batistaca, who again is Mestre João Grande. Incredibly enough, I don't know exactly how that connection is made, and I would love to hear more about that. And maybe one day I'll know, but that's what it says in the book. A lot of the influence comes from Mestre João Grande, and the actual game itself of Miyujinho was developed mostly with Mestre Espirro Mirim, one of Mestre Suassuna's students, and they went through a lot of the movements. Him and a few others, of course, they would go over the movements, sequences, the kind of game that it was, and I guess they kind of developed it themselves over the course of a few years. It was created again in 1988, so not that many years ago. Miyujinho was supposed to be played in a roda that's only 2 steps by 2 steps in diameter. So you're talking about maybe 3.5, 4 feet. The whole roda, it's really, really small. And it's, if anyone's seen a game of Miyujinho is an incredibly tight game. You have to be very precise, you have to be very controlled and sharp with your movement. The second marker is also has to do with Mestre Espirro Mirim and Mestre Zé Antonio also. Both of them did something a little bit different from some of the other students of Mestre Suassuna. So back in the day, what you would do is if you were a student of Mestre Suassuna, he would say like, okay, well you can teach classes now. And if you did decide to teach classes, you would create your own school and create your own school name. So you weren't Cordao de Ouro anymore. You would actually have something else. Mestre Urubu has Ijexá, Mestre Marcelo Caveirinha has Mandinga, and there are many others like this. There are many other offshoots of CDO that have their own names, their own system of doing things. And it wasn't until Mestre Espirro Mirim and Mestre Zé Antonio asked Mestre Suassuna if they could use CDO, the name, for their group, that eventually was decided that, okay, well, I guess now people can start doing this. So they kind of started the trend with that, which is cool because that's kind of the origin of the franchise as a franchise. It wouldn't really have happened if it wasn't for these two students deciding to do that. And I think that's really awesome because, you know, students have a tremendous ability to influence their teachers and influence the community in general. You know, you have a lot of power, more than you would think. So eventually this logo becomes official in 1997 and CDO becomes a thing. One of the coolest events to go to throughout the Capoeira season, the year, is Capoeirando. It's CDO's biggest event. All the big names come, everyone's invited, it's a huge party. I have yet to go, I will be going, and I will be making a video about it and it'll be awesome. But until that time comes, know that Capoeirando is something that was created in 1998. Super recent, and it's something that has kind of become a big tradition now. It's gotten larger and larger, it seems, every year. And every year, amazing capoeiristas come together. And it's just cool to hear about the origins in the book. A lot of people have their formatura during Capoeirando. Names like Mestre Kibe, Mestre Coruja, Máscara, Invertebrado. There is just so many people who come out of Capoeirando, and it's cool to see their names in the book. And I'm not going to go over all of them because there's literally dozens of them, but you can see a lot of your favorite capoeiristas in those pages, and you can see where they had their formatura. And you know, that's really when they become, I guess you can say, like adult capoeiristas. And it's just really cool to see those people on there, on the page, recognized. And you can see that those people go on, most of them at least, go on to be very, very popular around the world, doing workshops all over the place. So that's sort of the end of chapter 4. There's plenty of more stuff that happens in chapter 4 and in the book. The book is amazing. It goes over tons and tons of stuff that you just never would know about if you didn't just sit down and read it, or, you know, had time to ask all these different people about Mestre Suassuna's history. And the history really is more about Mestre Suassuna. So although I did touch a little bit on CDO, the brand, the Capoeirando, all that stuff, it really is a story about Mestre Suassuna and his journey from Bahia, training, Mestre Doria's Academy, or Major Doria's Academy, to Sao Paulo, meeting Mestre Brasília, Zé de Freitas, and building Cordao de Ouro into what it is today. So here we are 50 years later, and we have this amazing book, this amazing resource. So if you get the chance ever, you know, try to read it if you can, if you have the language skills. If not, that's why I made this video. I made this video so that people could learn a little bit, so they could take a little bit from the book, and maybe one day when their Portuguese gets good enough, you can sit down and read the book, or they'll come out with an English translation, one or the other. So I hope that you guys enjoyed. This is the 3-part series. I took a lot of time in editing this and shooting it, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. Again, hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed, subscribe if you can, and leave a comment and tell me a little bit about what you want to hear about Cordao de Ouro, because of course this is a story about Mestre Suassuna, but there's so much more to tell about CDO in general, the group itself, the people involved in it, and I would love to know what kind of questions you guys have about CDO, its history, and what its future looks like as well. So leave your comments down below, and I'll see you guys next time.